anyone
And
is
I think
giving me
amongst
help?
that is no
Good.
wonderful.
Good. Donna gave me help.
What is your word?
Giving
Giving, laughter.
laughter.
For my doctoral treatise, I did sort of developed a breathing exercise, and that's what I wrote on. And it was funny because it took me a lot of years to write my treatise, and I kept trying to come up with what to write it about, and I actually chose that because it seemed like it would be an easy way out and not have to do too much work. And then I discovered a lot of value in it. I also, besides having to reference my notes from all the years of school and seeing how it did tie into what I was studying and learning, I did discover it was a big part of my learning process. And a number of times in my notes I put breathing is, conscious breathing is the most important way I can take care of myself. So, what I wanted to do in my treatise was, people talked about breathing a lot in spiritual worlds, but I wanted to make my treatise more scientific. So I did a lot of research about it, from real research. One of the coolest studies I came across, and partially it was cool because it was done at Harvard Medical, is they used MRIs as the proof, not just how people felt or, but they did a study. It was an 8-week study, and people for 20 minutes a day would just focus on the breathing. And they took MRIs at the beginning and at the end, and they saw the people in the group that did the breathing, the white matter or the gray matter in their brain increased in size. So when that happens, it's more increasing in density, even though they call it size, because their brain did not grow this way, but and the gray matter, even though we don't fully understand the brain, the gray matter is used for a lot of thinking. Obviously, they don't really know exactly what the white matter and the gray matter is. But part of the reason I even looked that up is because when I was doing my study, which was basically do this breathing exercise it was just, the requirement was 10 minutes a day, but normally I would do it for longer. I started to notice that, like I do some things like putting, like a lot of times on websites, they send you this like code, like if I signed into Yahoo with a different computer, they'll send me this code of like 6 numbers, and then you have to put that in. And I was finding I was remembering these numbers more easily than I was before. And I thought, I wonder if doing this study and doing the breathing had an effect on that. So I started doing research and came across some very interesting things about my near-death experience, which was, so.
I think we talked about it.
That story is pretty simple. It's just a lot of times I'll begin to ask people if they have questions or whatever. So if you know my basic story, if you have any questions, I can just start to answer that. If not, I'll start to tell you some of my experiences. Yeah. Okay, so I was thinking about it. One of the coolest, experiences I had. So after I had my near-death experience, I started meeting amazing people, really amazing people. And we did really cool things, but, and I learned a lot about spiritual healing and metaphysical. This was some years ago. This woman that I met, she had pain through her whole body. Basically, she had arthritis in her, everywhere. Her whole body was hurting. And she had a session with me. I work with people on the phone. I could see with her that, because something that started during my near-death experience, I was able to see things spiritually. And with this woman, I could see she had a Native American spirit guide with her. And she was talking for a while. Sometimes I get a little impatient when people are talking because I'm seeing stuff, and I know it's polite to listen to them. But, so I was waiting. She was telling me why she was hurting and everything. And I said, you have this Native American spirit healing guide with you. And she said, I know. I went to someone she was already told that. And I could tell she was afraid. I said, you don't understand, this guy is here to help you. And like that, I could just hear it in her voice, and what I see spiritually, things shifted. And within seconds, she goes, wow, the pain is gone in my body. And that was like one of the coolest things. So I experienced things like that pretty regularly, but that was a very dramatic shift from pain in her whole body to some of the other cool things. A couple of years ago, this woman came to me. This was in person, though. One of my clients, who's been a client for 30 years, who I have to say her business recently got bought out for a lot of money. Many times she was going to give up on her business, and I could see that she could be very successful, so she just made a lot of money.
Could you explain a little bit about how you see what you see spiritually after your near-death experience? Like what was it?
Yeah, I'll finish. So this woman, she referred a friend to me, and her friend basically was had an abortion about 6 months before she came to see me. And her reproductive system, I don't know exactly what she was diagnosed with, but at that point it was getting worse and worse, and the doctors were telling her to forget about having children. I could tell as soon as I started working on her that she was going to be okay, and after 2 sessions she sent me an email. She had another session after that. She said, I don't know what you do, because she didn't really believe in what I do. Her friends sort of forced her to come see me. But the doctors were saying, you're going to be able to have a child now. So, and she has a child. About a year ago, I found out she had a child. It's really cool. This is not someone that I worked on. It was someone that I met socially. And there were, what I do nowadays is kind of acceptable and kind of cool. But years ago it was not, so I was basically in a social situation, and this woman found out what I do, and she's asking me all these questions, and she tells me she gets migraine headaches, and I don't like when people try to engage me to work on them when it's a social situation. So, but she was asking me about her migraines, and I could see, like, sometimes what I see is more general. I could just see all this darkness on the side of her head. And in what I do, sometimes I see things and I know what they are right away. Sometimes, like I have these checklists to go through. And you sort of feel into the checklist, but very gentle, because you don't want to, we're such powerful creators in the spirit. If you want it to be that way, it will be that way. So it would be easy to convince myself that it's something. So it's sort of like you keep your mind way back here and you check these things and then feel if there's an energy with it. So I would go with her, I would probably, and if she, again, I wasn't working, but if I was, there would be a list of things I would check to see. There's one like levels of consciousness, there's one, you got colors. So the colors are something, a lot of times the energy comes in different colors. But we can also sort of ask the colors to come in. So sometimes we muscle test, like if someone has, whatever might come up, a color might be a healing. Each color has a different vibration and frequency. Like if you look at the light, if you know anything about frequencies, each color has a different frequency. There's also body systems you can check. So it was funny, after talking to Donna about this, because she kept saying, I don't like that you can't know that stuff. Because I always talk about it's not knowable, but it is knowable, it's just we talk about it that way because it's in a different type of knowing. Like we're trying to use our mind to get things, like something you could write down, or something you could know exactly. We do get to know. We could describe it as you know in your heart, but it is, you want to hold the information back. Yes?
You said you're able to see like the colors of
Yes.
people, so can you see like our colors, or is it just like whatever that?
You're talking about your aura, that
Yeah.
type of thing. Sometimes I can see that. Okay. For me, things shift what I can see, and it's I used to do that all the time, and the purpose of what I do is more about healing and seeing. So what I do see a lot is energy just releasing from people. Okay. So what would you like to know? I mean, if there are things I can see about you, if that's what you're asking. So, right, you probably don't
You
want
can
to,
see that
because
it's pretty.
it's, and again, in social situations, people ask me, and I say, you don't even want me to do that because I don't really have discernment. And, you know, when I first meet people, what I see is really something good, and everyone has it. So we would call that our soul or our spirit or something, and everyone has it. There's been very few people in history that haven't, and you would know, like Hitler, someone who, that part of him got taken over by the real negative thing. I mean, and there are some people that are pretty nasty, but they have that good thing. Okay, so that part is what I always see right away, and when I'm talking, that part in each of you sort of comes up, it sort of like comes out a little bit and above you, and becomes present. And in the way I was saying, you can't really know that, there is a direct connection between that, so that's, we could call that your high self, and then my high self. There's also a self in the gut that's more of, when people say you have a gut feeling or a gut reaction, there's a part of us there, and there's a direct communication in that also. So in one way, the words don't matter all that much. There's 3 levels of consciousness that we have. One is the basic self. We call them 3 selves. That's the conscious self, which is who you think of as yourself, and then your high self, which is your spiritual self. And we want to get, part of what I do when I work with people, a lot of times our basic selves are really put down a lot, because it is, I talk about it like a teenager, okay, who has a lot of energy, can do a lot of good, but sometimes doesn't have proper discernment about what to do. And then, so we want to direct that. We want to use our conscious self. Okay. The basic self is, in a certain way, has more of a connection to the spiritual self, because it's not thinking. That non-discernment lets it be open to things that might not make sense. So the spiritual self connects into the gut, and then the gut is trying to get us to do things, and then our mind comes in and goes, oh no, you need to behave, you need to do this, which we do. We can't do things that are illegal or hurt ourselves. But so somewhere we want to get all these things to work together in a direction. One of the really fun, so after my near-death experience, I met this guy, Rashad. He was a Sufi sheikh. So Sufism is based on Islam, but it's, a lot of people have preconceived ideas about Islam, which, there's people in every religion. I mean, a lot of major wars in this world were fought on, the premise of Christianity. But now Islam gets a bad rap, basically, but so it was cool. He was a magical type of guy, and he did some of these. He was my first person I learned about this stuff. One of my first experiences, he would work with flower remedies, and he also made his own remedies. So I asked him to give me a remedy. He sent me a bottle of drops that just tastes like water. So he puts his healing vibration into the water, and I took it, and within an hour I had a fever that was dangerously high. I was married at the time. My mother was still alive. They were saying, you need to go to the doctor, and I knew it was part of this healing process. I just thought that was very cool, and then, a lot of emotional stuff was coming on. I had a lot of memories, and I had never met him in person at that time. Just a friend of mine introduced me to him. Another cool thing, so he ended up marrying me and my ex-wife, and we had this cool rose ceremony. he said, go out and get some roses, closed roses, and cut the stems off. He said, get 9 of them. So I brought those to the ceremony, and he took all the 9 roses, and he put one in my hand. There was also a bowl of water there. He put one in my hand and said, 1 stands for unity, or I don't remember what he said. I put that rose in her hand, and he added another one and said 2 is for whatever. And it went up to 9, and there were 9 roses in my hand. He said, drop them in the water. I dropped them in the water, and the roses all opened up. The room filled up with the fragrance of rose, and the water had turned to rose. It was just a very magical. So I did start to meet a lot of people. It ended up, I didn't realize this guy Rashad and his assistant both did. I met. It just seemed kind of funny. I didn't really, after that time, I did spend a lot of time studying about death. People weren't talking about near-death experiences then, but there were a lot of, they were talking about what happens after death, but the term near-death experience hadn't existed. So any other questions or comments?
You said you talked about your auras.
Yes.
I've seen auras since I was a child.
Cool.
My mother and her mother.
Yeah.
I saw my first auras when I was like probably 3 or 4, and it scared me.
Yeah.
I only see them in mirrors.
Oh, well, yeah.
It's very strange. I don't know if you've ever heard
Well, I
of
remember
that.
I went to therapy for a while, and I didn't realize that. I said to the guy, you know, when you see these colors, I was a teenager, and he started asking me if I'd ever done LSD. So it is, but so even in that, it's like you want to see, there are so many levels and so many things that you want to, like you were asking that, I don't look for the thing, I let like what comes present. Because there are so many things you could see, and if you start, oh, aura, then you're narrowing down what you can see. In a certain way, like it's sort of like when you start a new subject in school, you're very open, like, oh, I don't know anything, and you're open to learning a lot. It's sort of like, I don't know, if you go on vacation, you don't know the people there, it's like you're quick to make new friends. When you go back to your normal situation, you tend to just, look for your friends. So, but there's that openness. And that's why we talk about not knowing, but you do get to know. You get to know in a way, and I describe it like this information comes, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know. Then your mind wants to know, but you have to wait. No, I don't know, I don't know. Then at this point you know, and it's like, wow, and you just really, really know.
Well, it's the light. It's the light from people. I have no control over it.
Yeah.
I've never tried to like hone it or
Yeah.
make it a skill or anything like that. It just happens.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you for you, your third eye is a little off,
Mhm.
and the looking is a little different than the way that you look. So it just started to line up. So it lines up with your heart, and then you can start to see things, and you don't know what it means until you really know. Because our mind comes in and like, what is that? I see this, I see this. And then it's, again, you just hold back, you wait, and then all of a sudden it's like, and sometimes you have this, oh, I know, and then you still don't even know how to put it into words. But you know, but you can't tell anyone because you don't know. So it's going to be a different thing. Okay? Yeah, everyone has something. So, and it could be, so, some of the things that happened before, a lot of my learning about this actually happened from playing basketball. Okay, so it's like when you're playing a sport and you're hot playing basketball, it is the most spiritual thing in the world. Because you do things you just couldn't possibly do. You're connected to people in a way that you couldn't imagine, and it's just like things are clicking. So one of the things I think about, it's when I was, say about 10 years old, I was playing basketball, and it was almost halftime, and there was like 5 seconds left, and instead of finishing, my team's bench was at the other end, I started to dribble the ball toward half court, and right at half court, I just took the ball with one hand and threw it over my head. I knew as soon as I threw it that the ball was going to go in. I didn't even turn around, I was so sure about it. And it went and swish, and everyone went, wow! So, but it was one of those things, like I connected in that way, and everyone has something. You might not have found it yet, but it could be like some lucky people have that with money, and they can just make money. So I learned a lot. My dad was an electrical contractor. Watching the electricians, there were some people, they could fix anything. And this was years ago, before everything was computerized, but so these guys were kind of old school, but they were learning how to do computerized stuff. And some of these old guys, how they could go and fix this with no education. It's like, that was really cool. So you could see them to.
Does that come from past life skill?
Some of it does. You know, there are
Like
things.
a child protege?
Yeah. So my daughter is super smart in math. And when she was young, she could always, and she still can, get the answers in math. She's in 9th grade, so young is pretty young. But so when she was in like 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, she could get the answers to math problems without really knowing how to do them. And in those grades, it worked fine. When she got to 7th grade honors math, her teacher said, I don't really care if you get the answer, you need to know how to do it. So she was stuck in this situation, even though she was honors math, actually starting to have to learn math. So, in a way, there's that part of waiting to know, but then there's also the part of doing the practical part, like what works in this world. A lot of spiritual teachers speak in stories. So one story that I heard is, this person was gambling, and an intuitive voice was telling them what numbers to play or something like that. And, the person, he got a number of them right, and then he, bet his a lot of money on it, and then it came back not being right. And it's just like a funny thing. Like, it's just an example of you want to check things out. Okay? There are certain things. So I have, besides seeing things, sometimes I hear things. And when I'm working with people, I'd like to say, put some romantic, great name on this, whoever tells me these things. But one time, it's a fun story, that I tell it. I was talking to this woman, and the voice started saying ice cream to me. And I was ignoring it because the woman wasn't talking to me about ice cream at all, and she, it just didn't seem important. And then sometimes this happens, this voice just starts saying, say ice cream, say ice cream, say ice cream. So I've learned to listen, but this time I wasn't. So I stopped her, I said, I just have to say ice cream. And she just started laughing and crying right away because she had a fight with a boyfriend earlier about ice cream. So it's kind of great. It's like a cool, fun thing. Let's see what else. Any other questions? I always keep asking questions. Usually at some point the questions just start coming and coming. But whatever it is, just, even if it seems kind of silly.
Any questions?
No? Yes?
What are your views on the afterlife, if you even have any?
Yeah, well, I guess I have to start as there's no way to prove it. But to me, I see things from other lifetimes, and people say, how do you know it's not just in your mind? If they're healing, I think it doesn't really matter. I see images of things. As far as I know, they're from other lifetimes. It seems they're just things in the spirit. And I know it 100%, but it's not like, well, sometimes I see things that look as solid as this wall, to tell you the truth. A lot of times it does look kind of, half solid. Do you have beliefs about?
I'm conflicted.
Yeah.
But I hope that there's a heaven, hopefully,
Yeah.
the way that I've been raised. However, from a more realistic standpoint, I just don't know definitively. I'm open to it, whatever's out there, reincarnation, the whole shebang, whatever. I'm open to all of it, basically, but I don't know definitively if I have like a set belief.
Right. Well, I think it's better to not have a set belief because it is good to be open. So sometimes people, so in the spirit, there are positive beings, we could say, and there are negative beings. Sometimes there's beings that are in between that are kind of messing with people. And a lot of times they're So basically, what I do sometimes is tell those beings that they can go to the next level. Like they're stuck in a level here. They don't, usually they're not stuck, they just don't know to look at a certain place. And a lot of times it is to find what religion they would connect to, or what saint. It's not really the religion, but what spiritual guide they would connect to. And it's not always what religion they were brought up, which, but Jesus is the main one that you go to first because he works the most, but it could be Allah, it could be more in the Jewish religion would be more Abraham usually than Moses, but there's Baha'i, there's all sorts of different guides that can be.
So that's in the spirit world.
Yes.
So you help people who are kind of stuck in between places like purgatory?
Well, like that, but yes. Okay. So there's nothing, well, that's not true. So there are different levels, and ideally we go to this, there's labeling that I use the most that I understand is, so there's the physical, there's astral, causal, mental, etheric, and soul, and then there's a lot of levels in the soul. And so we want to go to be the soul level, and that would be what people think of as heaven. Okay, when you get to that, then you don't come back necessarily to this planet.
That's like enlightened?
Sort of. Again, it's, there's a part of wanting to pin it down, but it's, so even in the soul level, it's even less pinnable down than the other levels. So in the astral and causal level, it's very similar to this, but in some of them, like if you have nightmares with monsters in it, sometimes it would be, when you're young from the astral and causal. But, so what you're saying is, be open, and it might be, what religion were you born in?
Catholic.
So, there's a lot of good things in the Catholic religion. There's a lot of the guilt and feel bad about yourself. That's not a good thing. Okay, same with Judaism. Okay, but inherently the teachings of Christ are very good. Okay, and the part of where him leaving the body is an example of, transcending this level and going into a higher level. So some of those magical things aren't really happening. And I've seen healings like, I talked about a couple of them, but it's really quite amazing. It's funny, the thing with the woman about having a baby, it happened, and to me it's just normal. When I'm working, I didn't even realize how cool it was, and then I used my testimonials to publicize what I do, and I went back and I read this, and I go, wow, this woman was not going to have a kid, and then she had a kid. Like, that's like a miracle. I was like, wow, that is really cool. Well, I had a thing, someone telling me, your father wants you to go back, but I knew it wasn't my physical father.
Right.
Oh, wow. So when someone said to you, your father wants you to go back, you knew it wasn't your dad, you think it was God the Father?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
And so talking about religion, so I met this guy, Rashad, who was a sheikh, and he actually started talking to me about Mary, the mother of Jesus, and that just touched me in a way that was like, and he would always say to me, I'm not your teacher, we'll find your teachers, but he taught me a lot of stuff, and so that really opened up the Christianity thing, and I feel very connected to. So do you, you're more balanced in there, so you can open up in your heart. So even with the breathing, in a certain way, that's something that's kind of cool, because it's, air is invisible, so, but with everything, it's like, be real, hold your mind back to see if it's going to work. So there's a certain seriousness that can come in, and it takes incredible dedication, incredible discipline. I've worked with some really high-level athletes. And right now, one of my clients is an ex-NFL player, and I said to him, compared to your training, that was a walk in the park, even though he had to change. He had to eat a certain way. He had, for however many years, he had to live and breathe football every second of the day, every year, to play at the level he was at. And I would say, that's nothing compared to this. Because there is the part that's soft, and there, it was like he would always know what to do. in this, you don't always know what to do, and then there's a part of, they'll let me wait until I know, and really know, because our mind will come in and trick us. The negativity will come in and trick us, especially if you start moving high up spiritually, these negative things go, no, the negative job is to maintain the lower physical level, and so it comes in and goes, well, let me mess with them, so I can go on and on and get kind of, because a lot of people who do things like I do, and I understand, because to tell you the truth, for business, it'd be really good if I had something more concrete to do, but that's not what it is. So there's this openness that is, well, breathe. I mean, I do breathing every day, so I think breathing's a really important thing. And it's like, just be open in that. And even I tell people, like, I can guide people a lot, but everyone in certain ways is individual. So you're looking to connect, you're looking to know something, and then there's a part of, well, I don't really know. So your basic self here is a little disturbed. So the high self, which might be above your head here, or it could be in your heart, communicates to the basic self of what your spiritual path is. Then this doesn't quite understand it, but will do anything to get that done. And sometimes we overcreate it.
I have to say something because I always feel negative stuff before I can feel anything positive. Like
Yeah.
I always know something negative coming, but I can never know something positive always coming. I always get it. When I get a negative feeling, I always feel it coming. Like I just know it's about to happen. Like,
Yeah.
I always feel negative stuff coming. I just know. Like I'll wake up and be like, today don't feel right. Something happens that it's like all the time.
Well, that could be a good thing, and I mean, we are designed to notice what's negative, because there's a safety issue, and it's like, how do you survive?
Yeah, survival.
Mhm.
So, but there's a way to, you just don't want to make that who you are.
Right.
You want to understand there can be information there, and part of the problem is also then, we have these different levels, so somewhere in there you might know something's going to happen, but then are you thinking about it? Is it making it go like
It's the law of attraction.
You're right, but it's not like I just I'll just start thinking about it. It's not something that'll be on my mind. It's just something that I feel, and then once I feel it, it's like okay, now.
So
now,
in here, in the center of your chest is your heart center, you know, the chakras are.
Mhm.
So in there, there's better information. Okay. So how old are you?
21.
21. Well, you look younger than that.
Thank you.
But there's this connecting, and so in the morning, the breathing exercise what I did actually for the study was combine that with journaling. I do that pretty much every morning,
Mhm.
and some of it is to get my mind more focused on positive. So I was mentioning my daughter, she's super smart, she's in all honors classes, she's, a good kid. She's not, her friends are good, you know what I mean? And she gets anything below 90, I start worrying. Kind of silly, right? So I have to remind myself it's kind of silly, but it takes a while. It's, it's a fun example about what you're talking about. You have a certain choice in there what you're doing.
Right.
So you want to see, is that information real? And you go, well, I'm not really sure. And then, is there something you can do about it? And then there might be, well, I have a feeling I'm going to get hit by a car in the street, like, don't go there. You know what I mean? Or something like that. And,
Or what if even it's about a person?
yeah.
Like, it could be about a person, it could be about people in your family, just something you always, like, I don't know, maybe because it's the area too I probably live in, and I don't know, I'm just always feeling.
You worry about it. Well, some of it is, so the negative things, they want to get you to worry. So, again, is it, if people are in danger, is there something you can do about it? It's really amazing what he's accomplished now. So he's out of football, and it's a bummer for him. Because he was in his glory. It's just that thing, like I was saying in sports, like this natural thing comes in, and then, so now he's trying to find other things in the world to do that. But so, it's tricky. We're born with our karma, whatever that means. I was born in, white upper middle class, different world, but still there are things that come along with that, and so that's part of your karma, and you can understand that that's a good thing. So, are there times you know specific things are going to happen when they happen?
Well,
So that's a cool thing. So that's a very good thing.
it creeps me out more than anything though, because like
Yeah.
why I shouldn't even be wanting to know or feel something's gonna happen.
Yeah. Well, in a certain way, most people have something that they're intuitive about.
Yeah.
Like I was talking about the money thing, some people are so good at making money, and
It just comes to them.
it's just like, they're so good. And the electricians, athletes, those are things I've experienced. And, probably each of you has experienced someone. They talk about sometimes someone's going to call, on the phone, and it happens. It's a simple thing. But so in your heart centers in here, you could open up in there a little bit more and appreciate it's kind of cool to know things, right? It is a little weird, but that's only because they don't talk about it.
Right.
And when you're real little and you do that stuff, people tell you don't do that. 'Cause,
But,
well, we get tuned into things. So I've discovered sometimes I see things. Normally when I see things like in the future, there's a degree that it's going to happen. Sometimes I know things are going to happen. They're definitely going to happen. Usually it's not definite. But you gotta, that's part of the trick. Like, how do you want to use your intuition, but sometimes that's the story with the gambling. The guy, I bet $5, then you bet, like 1,000 or whatever, and then he lost. And it's like, that's a story, but you want to check things out if it's, when I'm working with people, my intuition is way more accurate than for myself. And I think that's a true
I
thing.
feel like maybe it is like my intuition.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I remember my boyfriend, he was working with a guy, but he would tell me so much about him. I never met the guy, but I
Yeah.
told him, I was like, don't trust that guy because
Yeah.
he seems a little. And then at the end, he ended up not paying him, owing him $1,000.
Right.
And he would end up doing what I told him.
So you had a feeling, and so
And I didn't even have to meet the guy. I just already.
yeah, and some people are incredibly accurate with this stuff, and so that's good.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, is everybody near-death experience the same? Because my dad last year, he had a massive heart attack and he died, and they revived him. But he told me it was the peacefulest moment of his life. He never seen a light or anything like that, but he said it was the most peacefulest moment.
That was the biggest thing of mine, is the feeling.
Yeah.
Just like everything was so
Right?
all right.
Yeah, he said it made him want to, when he, healed, he got better, him want to, eat better, work out more. It made him want to, it took him, basically on, I want to build my house better. It was.
And ask him if he now fears death, or he feels like death is, he's not afraid to die.
No, he even said, no, when I asked him, he said it wasn't enough. He said he wasn't afraid to die because he knows, and it's everybody, his family, our family down south kind of dropping. They're getting old, and my dad's about to hit 60 in another year. So, it's he's not scared of it, but he just wants to know when it's gonna happen, just so that he knows that, because he's more concerned about me than anything. That's what he's all about.
And that's why people fear death, because they want to make sure it feels
He's worried about me more than anything when he's gone. He's not worried
Well,
about life.
like I said, I have young daughters, and I feel that
And I'm his only daughter. I'm the youngest out of 5, and I
they're
got
all
older brothers.
good brothers, so yeah, he has a special place in his heart for you. So that scientific part is really very important. When I was young, if anyone ever mentioned anything like this to me, I would just not even listen. So the part of what works here, that's what we're here to do. Okay, so those are not separate things. And even, like I said with my treatise, there are a lot of, when I was first starting my research in my treatise, there was something that was on npr.org, and I thought this is a reputable source. And the guy was writing, there was an article about are people using breathing techniques to help recovery after surgery. And his article went on to say yes. And he took this quote from a study, and basically the quote was saying that people do try to use it, and the way he used that quote was like the study agreed with him, but I went and looked at the study, and the study said definitely does not help at all. So, in that way, a lot of people in this world, they're saying things and they're not, there's no way to prove it. So going all that way, the best you can, I mean, we're talking about something that's invisible, so it would be very hard to prove. But I can tell you sometimes people try to stump me in that, like they'll tell me someone else, they'll ask me about something, and after they'll say, oh yeah, someone else told me the same thing. So sometimes I do see the same things in other people, which, it seems like it would be a little more credible than if it was just me. But usually when I tell people about a past life, they can see how the pattern relates to what's going on. But don't let go of that scientific thing, because, there are a lot of... I'm very skeptical of anyone who says they do what I do, to tell you the truth. So I would stay with that.
I'd like to say, like, I could agree with you, but more than anything, I think I'm 100% on both sides. Because there's certain things that science proves to you that, and there's certain things that your religious background proves to you that nothing that science can't control. Like, for example, I could have lost three people that I love in 1 year, my father, my mother, and my brother. But there's certain things like, you pray and you do certain stuff like that, it makes you feel like science cannot help that.
Yeah.
It's like, that's all like your belief, that's what you know, that's what you feel, that's what you know, that's what you grew up on, so that's what you're gonna consistently do. So when you do that every, like, all the time, or something goes bad, or you really need a good prayer, or something works out in your favor, I feel like that's nothing like science can fix. But there's certain stuff that science has proved that make you believe a lot of other stuff. So I'm basically on both sides, really.
Well, there is some area that's in between, like quantum physics. A lot of it is trying to figure out how subatomic particles function, and people know if people are looking at subatomic particles, it affects what they do. So a lot of quantum physics experiments are designed to try to trick the subatomic particles into thinking we're not observing them, and that's a cool thing. There's someone years ago proposed it is possible that subatomic particles are not moving if we're not observing them. And there's no way, it's another thing, you can't prove that. There are things that are sort of in between the spiritual and the physical. They even have...
Metaphysics.
Yeah, they have God particle now, talk about it, quantum physics that is a part of, that there is something that's in between, because we do have effect on what we see, that what we think, what we believe does have an effect on us.
What about consciousness?
What about it?
Consciousness. When our physical body degenerates, like we talked about a book written up at Yale called "This Is How We Die," right?
Yeah.
And we know our physical body degenerates, right? And then, does our consciousness stay alive? And this is
I'm not. There's our soul that stays.
Could our soul and consciousness be synonymous?
We're using words that, I don't use consciousness for that, but if that's what we're talking about, yes,
Yeah.
there's also our basic self maintains. It's very in charge of our physical body. So our different selves, sometimes people have other lifetimes where just one of their levels is there and not the others. So, sometimes I work with people and they just have thousands of past lives, and that's part of the reason.
And you can tell how many past lives people have had.
I probably could.
Yeah.
Again, what I do is more for healing, and it's kind of cool to see those things, but that part is sort of like sometimes I'm working with someone, especially when I first work with them, it's like I'm seeing so much stuff is moving, and then it clears, and I'll try to explain to someone what happened, and they feel the difference. It just, then they go, oh, what was it? And I said, you probably don't want me to tell you, because then sometimes you become responsible for it. So I'll just tell a story. years ago, this one I had an office in New York City. So like I said, I mostly work on the phone now, but this one I had people come to see me. And I use these little electronic devices once in a while. I used to use them all the time. And this woman came to me, I happened to hit it off the, this is a Russian device, and the Russian woman who's, you know, one of the top experts, I really hit it off with, so she would send people to me. This person came to me because of the devices. She was kind of sick. And I was treating her one time, and she started to say that she feels weird. And I said, that's good. You're used to being sick. You're going to feel weird when you start to get better, and you're better for it. And she said, I feel really weird, and she started to perspire. And I took the device off her because I could see a lot of stuff was moving. She actually blacked out. And then I saw this form leave her body, a not nice looking thing.
Oh.
Then I put some water in her mouth, and she came to, she ran to the bathroom, she had diarrhea, she threw up. And then she came out, luckily her husband was the next person because she just wouldn't have been able to get home by herself. And then I was wondering, should I tell her what I saw? It seemed like too big of a thing, but she felt so much better, and I know that had a lot to do with it. So I decided to tell her what I saw, and basically she, you know, after, I was really surprised each of the following couple of weeks that she came back. Basically she said she's, I mean, she was so, you could see, I mean, her skin was kind of dark and yucky, and, you know, she was just feeling so much better. And she basically came back and said she is okay with what I said, partially because she had seen things like that in science fiction things on the TV. And it was a cool thing, but it was a very instant healing. And when I was explaining to, so her husband came in and they were talking to me together about asking what happened. And I said, sometimes people just pick up this negativity or curses people get, and that was in her case from people.
Is it because of the people she interacted with, or where she was going, where she was living?
Well, just the last line of this story is her husband was really sharp, and he said, well, people blessings also. And I go, yeah, they do. I don't remember exactly where this, I didn't, so what I do is geared towards healing, and you just keep looking for the information until it's enough for healing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so in that case, I didn't know where that form came from, but it, you know, the,
Would you call it a manifestation of something, not, you said it was not nice.
no,
Obviously it
it
wasn't
looked
in-
like, in Star Wars, the character that came after Darth Vader, not Darth Vader, the one after that.
Dark Maul.
What's that?
Dark Maul.
Is
The red.
that, he had,
The spikes and the red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it looked sort of like that, but it was before that movie, so I'm sure in my mind I wasn't confused.
Jonathan, do you have a question?
Oh yeah. You said that you focus a lot on healing.
Yes.
Do you have, or if you even do you have a preference towards more of the physiological aspect, like people coming in with like physical pain, or do you focus more on emotional, mental pain, like somebody coming in saying that I feel that I'm depressed or anxious constantly? Do you have a preference on either one?
I don't have a preference. I mean, it seems I naturally I know more about the psychological part, but sometimes I'm working with people and they don't know a lot about the physical part. In a certain way, those stories are better for publicizing what I do too, when people feel the physical difference. But so, yeah, I work on the phone. I mean, right now I have a pretty consistent client in Australia, and I love that because that's really far away, and I really love it because sometimes it's a different day we're there than it is here, and I just think there's something really cool about that. But people feel, I mean, you feel the energy in your body. I mean, it's, even though it's thousands of miles away, so it is physical.
Yeah.
And so in one of the devices I use, I learned a lot about it. It's an electrical device you put on the skin. It gives you also readings, but you're looking for the part where there's, and I learned about a lot of this studying that, looking for the part where there's the most activity. So activity could be the most pain, or it could be just a lot of movement. And then, because usually that's a place your consciousness is focusing. So sometimes someone will have a physical pain, and it is more emotional. Sometimes it'll be
Yeah.
a memory, sometimes it'll be something very physical, so there could be physical trauma. Do I have a preference? No. No, I would say no. I was thinking of a funny story because when I first was wanting to start my practice, and this is a good tool, so I wrote up exactly what I wanted to happen. And, you know, I'd been learning about visualization and stuff like that, but I wrote out a multiple page detailed thing. And as I, you know, I knew that I should go for what I want rather than what I think it should be. So when I was writing this, I was thinking, I'd really like a lot of pretty women to come see me. And my mind comes in right away and goes, that's not very spiritual, that's, you know, but it's what I wanted, so I put it in. And then there's a thing like you read this over and you keep reading it. And shortly after I did that, I met this woman in New York City who was a manicurist for all the high fashion. She loved what I did. So for about 3 years, 90% of my practice were these models coming to see me. So it's like, you know, it's like trusting that thing, and then, well, I don't want to, you know, it's not like I'm having sex with them. So there was, you know, there was something I felt of sort of positiveness about it, and that was really good. Yes.
So what, like, can you, like, what you do, can it, like, also help work when people are mentally ill?
Yes.
Like, you know?
It could, yeah. Well, I often say I could help anyone, it's just a matter of how long it takes. Like some people call me and when they don't see amazing results in one session, they're like, that's all we're willing to do. And sometimes there is, but sometimes it takes a little
Right, time.
time. Yes.
Teresa, any questions? No? What do you guys do? Guys?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do you find that it's easier for the patients that are suffering from physical pain to suddenly or to heal from that, or the people that are suffering from emotional pain, if there even is?
Yeah, I don't think it's that would categorize things. It's some people are. I want to say some people are stubborn. So there's different layers that I see. So sometimes people have, I'm just thinking, like they have a depository of just this dark, yucky stuff. And they've created their life, a lot of drama in their life, like to protect themselves from feeling things. I would say those are the people, and when they're really good at that, when I work with people, stuff just starts to come up right away, which is good. So in normal psychological terms, there's transference. So there's, and then people start to perceive me as the problem in their life. And sometimes it happens so quickly that there's not been time to establish that that's not what's happening. I would say that, at least as far as some things, that would be the closest. There's also sometimes people have karma where it's not supposed to get better. And sometimes, I don't think there's a difference between the psychological and I don't know what the pattern is. Sometimes it just takes a longer time to, I'm just sort of checking. So there are all these different levels. I think, like with that woman with the Indian guide, it was so cool. Because once she opened up to it, this energy came in and helped her, and she was better. Yeah, I don't know the pattern. I don't know what it is.
It's all about energy. Right?
Well, yeah, but about the loving coming in. I mean, the closest thing to the spiritual energy you would say is the unconditional loving that, you might. The closest thing is how you love your kids, which I don't know if any have kids in here, but that's really the closest thing. So if you've ever experienced that love from your parents, like, you do something that they should hate you for and you don't. That's the closest things I've experienced. So there are some things that connect people into this energy. Okay? One is children, if you think of a little baby. One is animals. Sometimes people connect with animals. Nature, plants and stuff. Music is another thing. For some people, putting their hand on their heart. And for some people, Jesus or something they're connecting to through that. So a great example, my dad is almost 90. I mean, he's really in good physical shape. He still plays tennis and everything. And he has a girlfriend of a few years old. I mean, not a few, she's almost his age, but they've been going out for a few years. And it's really nice. He's become so much more loving to me, and I can really feel that inherent loving. And when he tells stories from my youth, I could tell that loving is there. It's just at the time, he was a very tough.
Interesting.
He wasn't always in the Marines, but he was for a while. He was like a Marine sergeant type person, just very tough. And I didn't understand it when I was young, but now I can tell that loving is there. But so part of it is for him is to understand what a great thing that is. Because it's not quite as exciting as football. So, you know what I mean? But it is, in ways, a much better thing. So some of it is, for him, is to shift gears from this adrenaline, really super exciting thing to doing good things in the world, and then finding a way for that special thing in him to shine. Football happened to him naturally because he was big, and he even said, I was better in basketball than football. But he, what's that?
A lot of people seem to say that.
Yeah, so it almost happened from naturally. Now he needs to develop something that he's going to really shine in, and some of that is taking care of his kids. Actually moved because where he played was not near where his children, so he moved to where he lived. Yeah.
John.
It was kind of like a comment and then a question at the end of it, but something that I've seen, well, not seen physically, but I've seen on the internet, is people are now believing that, believing that people are evolving to a point where biologically we are going to connect more with the spiritual world in a sense. The example that I saw was the concept of light and color. As an evolutionary being, if we go back generations, millions of years ago, we did not have retinas, eyeballs, we could not perceive light, therefore we did not believe in light. Color specifically, because we couldn't see it. And my question is basically, do you think that there will become, humans evolutionary, we will get to a point where just something in us hasn't evolved to the point, whether it be our eyes, sound, or mind, whatever, just hasn't evolved to that point, hasn't adapted to that point, or hasn't gained like a gland or something that would allow us to tap into the more spiritual, not physical, corporeal, basically, world.
I do. Yeah, I don't know if we need, maybe there is another gland or something, because some sci-fi things they have that. But, you're talking about that, and obviously everyone has a cell phone. I saw this special on PBS about all the cool things that have come from Star Trek. Just imagine, that person was seeing something, you know what I mean? And now there's so much technology based on that. Even Isaac Asimov, even years before that, it's, so yes, and I don't know if it would be some sort of different gland, or, it'd be interesting to look at that, because a lot of people say the pineal gland has a lot to do with it. I don't know if that's developed over the years.
The pineal gland is the third eye.
Yeah, if you look on my website, on the cards, there's a booklet about the breathing. It's cool. It shows how I developed it over the years from my experience. It shows a lot of the research. The actual part, how to do it, is only a few pages, but it is a very scientific-based thing. Thank you. Have a great